All right, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the second session. This is going to be a powerhouse group. My name is Jeff Jolly. I serve as the executive director at LISC Greater Kansas City. We're a nonprofit community development financial institution here in Kansas City. It's a national organization. We've been around for about 45 years. So we are based in New York, but operate nationally. So we've got a Kansas City market team that's made up of 8. You're going to hear from one of our team members, Carlie Turner, here shortly. But we were really excited about the opportunity. We've been sponsors of C3KC for at least the last 5 years. It's frankly one of the best conferences that our team attends every year. And so when they asked about the opportunity to do a housing panel, for me, it was really important. I know that there are a lot of powerhouse women who are working in the housing space. And so an opportunity to kind of uplift a handful of them today. And so I'm really excited to introduce. I'm told to give 30-second welcome to get you all settled. And then I'm handing it off here to Hannah Mitchell, who I have the pleasure of working with, who leads some of the regional housing partnership work for Mid-America Regional Council as their housing program manager. And so with that, I'm looking forward to an exciting panel, and thank you all for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Well, he made my introduction of myself easy, so appreciate that. So I'm Hannah Mitchell, Regional Housing Program Manager at Mid-America Regional Council, and I'm so excited that you guys have chosen to spend your morning with us. Today, we have, like Jeff said, just a great panel of housing professionals and experts from across the region to talk about this very timely and pertinent issue around housing affordability and availability. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to kind of center all of us on what we're going to be talking about today, and then we're going to get into a conversation. We really want this to be a conversation, so I've got some questions, of course, that I'm going to ask our panelists, and they're going to share their insights on not just the housing challenges, but what we're doing to address them and how we're working together creatively and innovatively to address these challenges. So looking forward to that. At the end, we will have an opportunity for you all, have about 10 or 15 minutes for audience questions. I know all of us have lived experiences around housing, so we all have questions about it, right? So want to give an opportunity for you guys to ask your questions. To do that, there are some note cards and pencils on the chairs around you. You guys have been to a breakout session already. Write your questions on there, hold them up, and they'll bring them up to me, and I can moderate those. So so today, as we were talking about, we got this group together to talk about what do we want to talk about related to housing? Like, how do we approach this issue? It's such a large, complex, multifaceted issue. What do we want to highlight? And this group really kind of came together, and we saw that we have individuals here from the public, private, nonprofit sectors. And that's really indicative of what it's going to take to get ourselves out of this situation that we're in around housing affordability and availability. And so we wanted to highlight some of the innovative ways that we're addressing these housing challenges across the region, not just in Kansas City, but in the whole Kansas City region, because it really is something that's not tied to any one neighborhood or city or county. It's a region-wide issue, and it's going to take region-wide collaboration and innovation to address it. So that's where we're at. That's where we're coming from. We're going to explore a lot of different topics today around housing. And we'll go ahead and get into the conversation. So I'm going to start by letting each of our panelists introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what their housing work looks like with their organizations. So we'll start with Fran.
Good morning. My name is Fran Sutton. I am a developer in Wyandotte County, focusing on creating housing for our workforce. That is part of our missing middle. It's our everyday working families. I am part of different facets of our community because I can see where, like, our downtown shareholders and our chamber and all of our different groups come together to create success in the housing industry, at least in Wyandotte County.
Good morning. I'm Christina Fenwick. I am the Director of Housing Development at a fairly new housing nonprofit here in Kansas City called Driven Development. We were formed really to address the supply side and preservation side of the issue that is housing. So we are a developer. We work on preserving existing affordable housing, and we work on adding supply. And we're doing that in both rental, multifamily development, and also on the single family side. We, similar to Fran, are kind of focused on what people call the missing middle. We had a conversation about how that can mean a couple of different things, but really working families, and we call it empowering people who power our communities. So uniquely focused on folks in education, healthcare, first responders, folks working in nonprofit and local government. We feel like those individuals are powering our communities, kind of keeping us going. And a lot of times that's at the sacrifice of salary, and are often priced out of the communities that they're serving. So that's kind of our focus.
Hello, my name is Trinity Davis, and I'm a 30-year educator and a 6-year developer. So so one of the things that I've worked to do is I created Teachers Like Me, which is a nonprofit. And so we develop housing for teachers in the Kansas City area. We specifically recruit Black teachers to Kansas City. One of the problems that we saw, or I used to be assistant superintendent in Kansas City Public Schools. And one thing we saw was that only 2.8% of teachers were Black in Kansas City. And everywhere we would go to recruit, they'd go, there's Black people in Kansas City. So we figured maybe having a Black teacher program, it's been easy to recruit. So we don't have the level of HBCUs, the historical Black colleges around us. So we were partnered with them and we recruit them and we house teachers around the Kansas City area.
Good morning. My name is Carlie Turner. I am a program officer for housing and capacity building with LISC Greater Kansas City. I'm gonna try to do a good job because my boss is in the back of the room, staring at us right now. In my role with LISC, the majority of my work is to work with Hannah on the Regional Housing Partnership. The Regional Housing Partnership is a collective impact initiative that was formed to support the housing ecosystem across the Kansas City region. So we work in the 9-county region of the Mid-America Regional Council, looking for opportunities to support folks like my co-panelists who are doing the work to build housing, to preserve housing, and to promote policies that will allow the creation of additional housing. Happy to be with you all today.
Great. Thank you all. Okay, so we're going to get started by talking about the need and what really the problems are that we're seeing in Kansas City. So I'm curious what each of you think are the most urgent gaps right now in the Kansas City housing market. So is it a lack of affordable units? Is it barriers to development, lack of certain housing types, or something else? Would love to hear your all's perspectives on that. And we're just going to popcorn it. Just take it away.
I'd like to go first. I'd like to say it's a combination of all of those things. I've been a real estate broker in Kansas City, Kansas for over 22 years, and I have firsthand experience working with buyers that get beat out of houses because the price point that they might be approved at is also a price point that someone else has cash to purchase out from under them. So the availability of people to save cash to purchase houses, but also in Wyandotte County, we have lots of vacant land, but we have not had developers to build on that at the scale that is necessary to create impact. So we don't have the funding for developers or private builders to create housing, or even maybe housing affordability has more recently become a push point. So now people are looking more at creating affordable housing. And we just touched on a lot of things. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons that housing affordability is important, and a lot of barriers.
I would say probably one of the biggest things is when I started looking at if we brought like 20 teachers a year here, overall we need about 1,700 teachers in the metro every year. So looking at if we just brought in 20, that's not many. To find the housing for them was not affordable for a teacher salary starting out. And also the other piece was there wasn't many places that could take all 20 teachers. So it was that piece there. And so what we are doing is building on vacant lots because there are a lot of those. And so that way we can build and keep the teachers together. So I think one of the problems, it is affordability, but it's also just being able to find the apartments once you get 20 people in Kansas City.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. And Driven Development works with teachers like me to help find some of those housing units because there is a lack. But I'll kind of narrow in, I guess, on a category that we focus on. There's not a lot of preservation of existing naturally occurring affordable housing. And I guess what I mean by naturally occurring is it's older housing product. It's maybe not very highly amenitized, right? It doesn't have a swimming pool and a concierge laundry and a dog park and all of these other things. But it's quality housing in good locations. And what tends to happen is a market buyer comes and buys that, makes minimal investment, and increases the rent as our market rent continues to increase. And so I think that's one of the challenging areas too, is that there are incentives and ways to go about building new supply, but what are we doing to preserve some of our existing supply or to bring existing supply back to a inhabitable state, right? We have houses that are sitting empty. We have apartment buildings sitting empty that need a significant amount of investment. And so I think it is all of those things. It's a combination of all of those things, but I think preservation of what we have is an area that's really challenging.
And I agree with everything that everyone else said. But also, I can add that I think there's probably a lack of innovation for different types of housing that can be built in the Kansas City area. I think the preservation part that Christina mentioned is very important. Being innovative about ways that currently existing structures can be preserved and brought back into service is really important. And finding ways to bring in the housing types that Dr. Davis mentioned that would house multiple people. Like once upon a time, now there are standing buildings that are empty. The Colonnade, the Kansas City Colonnade is iconic for our area. But those buildings are empty. And what do we need to do to bring them back into service that we could have 8-10 units available at one time in the same place? So if folks can get innovative about ways to develop, but also to preserve and reinstate, that's really important.
So a couple of you mentioned this concept of just the barriers to getting these houses built or preserving them or meeting the need that we're seeing. What are some of the most prevalent barriers that you all see in your work? Like what's keeping us from getting the housing that we know that we want and need?
I think this answers another question too, so I apologize, but because it's a misconception I think that people have around affordable housing is that it's not affordable to build or to preserve affordable housing. It's just as expensive to do those types of projects as it is to build a high-end market rate project or home where the margins are larger. You can sell that for more, you can make more money and move on to the next. We're building single family homes that have the same flooring and the same countertops and the same appliances as new homes that are selling for over $500,000. And we're trying to keep the price point below 300,000 or below 250,000. And so I think that's a really big challenge is that it's just as expensive to do affordable housing. So where are the tools? And a lot of times there are barriers with those tools. The tools that we have, the incentives that we have end up increasing the cost. And so then you're just asking for more and more in that capital stack to make it work.
I'll piggyback on that. Funding. So, I mean, I think everyone who knows me knows I'm always begging for money, but it's because of the funding of the building of the homes, because we have 80 teachers who want to come to Kansas City and teach and be in the program right now, but we don't have enough housing for them. So now we've created something that sounds good and all these people are hearing about it and want to come, but it's about if we could build more faster, it would really help us. But that comes at a cost. So I think, and we're a nonprofit, so everything's about funding for us. And they love funding the program, but they don't want to touch the capital. It's kind of risky for them. So, and I get that, but we're on our 5th house now, but through funding through some of our partners, which is another question, but I'll say through IFF, I think Amber's in here somewhere, but through that funding, they help with nonprofit real estate. We're able to keep that move going. But of course, then, you know, you're always looking at, we got to pay the mortgage down so we can support teachers. So I think, you know, that's probably the biggest barrier, money.
One of the things that I would like to add to this is that I am so thankful for seeing the number of women that are coming to the table in construction and in community development, because women bring something entirely different to the table. Women are fixers, and you will hear a woman say, "That's okay, we'll figure it out." And generally they do. So this also goes along. Thank you.
Deserves a clap.
Thank you. It's a different mindset. I was on a short radio interview last week, and the gentleman was saying, well, it's all about profit. It's how much money can we make? How much can we do that? And when I looked back and listened at the interview, my mother came out in me, because my answer to that question was, that's not the right attitude to have, at least not where I'm standing. It cannot be all about the profit. It can't in community development. We have to take on the role and the idea of just because you could doesn't mean you should. We can build a house, and let's just say it costs us $175,000 to build that house. In a subdivision that's selling for 300, that same 175 is going to sell for 300 because it could. But if we build that 175 in one of our neighborhoods where we're striving to create affordable housing or attainable housing, then we could sell it for 175 or 200 or somewhere close to that. Maybe we should. And honestly, from where I'm sitting, that is one of our biggest problems, is we have to be willing to take a lower profit margin to create a bigger impact, time and time and time, over and over and over.
And that's coming from a private developer, right? It doesn't only happen in the nonprofit and public sectors. I think that's important to highlight, that we need our private business partners to come alongside this challenge and finding solutions. Okay, we are moving right along on time, so I'm going to keep moving on our questions. Christina, I think you mentioned this, the idea of housing affordability, and that's something that we've talked a lot about. What does the word affordable mean? So I'm wondering if you guys can speak to how does your organization, how do you define affordability? What does that look like in Kansas City realistically in 2026 going forward?
I guess I'll start. It's a hard question to answer, because affordability is really, it's one of those in the eye of the beholder, right? Affordability to all of us on the panel probably looks differently. It depends on where you want to live, how you want to live. And so it's a really challenging question to answer. But we look at, as an organization, as honestly, affordability is the opportunity of choice. Can I move from this apartment to another apartment, or this apartment to a townhome? Can I eventually purchase a home? And the numbers are all going to look different for every single individual and every single household. But proximity to things where you're not utilizing as much transportation, you're not spending as much money on that. I think Mark has data on households spending almost as much on transportation as they are on housing. Yeah. And so trying to situate housing closer to your everyday life, your job, a grocery store, childcare, things like that. But it's hard to put a number on. I mean, I think you'll hear people talk about that, the average cost of a house, I'll pick on Overland Park, is well over $500,000. What people may say is an affordable range is something under 300,000. But again, for every single person in that room, I think that looks differently. So it's hard to put a number on, but I think we think about it as having choice, having supply, having opportunity, different housing types, and in good locations where your overall household costs may be lower.
And I'll say, for teachers like me, we have our teachers get here into Kansas City because, again, they're coming from 13 states right now. So when we get them here, they get here in July, but they don't get a paycheck. No one thinks about this until August 30th. My mom remembers that when I was a teacher, but no one remembers they don't get paid. And so they got to pay deposits, first month's rent. They cannot, that's why everyone goes, oh, I can't move there, but that helps. So for us, just to take away that deposit is huge for them because they can actually get in. And then I think for our teachers, what I don't want to see them doing is working second jobs. Most teachers work second jobs. They don't have time to plan for kids. And that part is so important because, again, we're looking at quality teachers that we want to bring out into Kansas City. So for us, we try to have them live in shared housing. A lot of them are right out of college and they're like, I don't want a roommate. And I'm like, okay, so then your rent is this. And if you get a roommate, your rent is that. And they're like, oh, okay, I can take a roommate. And so that's what I consider affordable is when they say, okay, I'll live with someone else. And it's good because it's for 3 years. And then by then they've got their graduate degree and they make enough to now get their own house. But we make sure we teach financial literacy to them because I'm like, if I'm helping you save, I need to see you saving. And so 3 of them have just purchased houses in Kansas City through Driven Development, 2 of them through Driven Development, which means they're here, so it helps with the retention of our teachers. So,
And I can just add to that working in housing as an arena, I was very shocked to learn that affordable housing has a technical definition. It doesn't just mean, housing that you can afford based on your salary. From HUD and government funded housing developers, they receive LIHTC funds, which is the low income housing tax credit. That is the technical definition of affordable housing. But in an everyday sense, that means nothing to people. And so, as Christina and Dr. Davis noted, it is really about what you can access based on your salary, what you can access based on the other responsibilities that you have, transportation, childcare. Like, how are those things of impacting your ability to be able to pay rent or a mortgage? And so I think with the Regional Housing Partnership have sort of tried to shift away from using the word affordable and shifted to attainable instead. What is attainable for you based on your circumstances and the salary that you have available? We I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but we live in a capitalist society and we sell our labor in order to be able to fund our lives. And so what do you get? What are you able to acquire in exchange for what you have earned in your living? And so that attainable piece and having access to a quality of life, still not having your cost of living and transportation, which those 2 things in Kansas City must go together because we are so spread out and you may live in Wyandotte County and work in Lee Summit. And so that means that you must have transportation included in that. So not having that number go above hopefully 40 to 50% of your entire take home so that you have the ability to live as well. So we have to make sure that all of that is encompassed in what it means for housing to be attainable.
So let's shift a little bit from the problem, the need, and into the solutions, right? And what you all are doing to address these challenges. So can you talk the title of this session is How Kansas City is Tackling Housing Affordability from Every Angle. So can you all talk a little bit about what you're doing in your work day to day, how you see yourself fitting into this larger housing ecosystem, what you're doing that's innovative or creative to address the challenges?
Well, one of the things is we need cooperation and collaboration with our local government. Sometimes our zoning codes need to change. Sometimes our footprint needs and guidelines need to change. But me personally, I started working on land bank lots in Wyandotte County a couple of years ago. And those lots help immediately create some affordability and attainability with housing, but also learning how to build houses that meet, wood comes in 4-foot increments. So why are we building 31-foot frames? I don't know. That just wastes wood, right? So that is one thing. Another thing is I started working on modular housing this year. It was something that came through my local government as a suggestion, and my personality said, "Go get your license." So I did, and so so I worked on modular. Modular is great because it is very efficiently fast. I can order a house on January 1st. It is delivered to a foundation February 1st, and it is ready for occupancy by February 28th. It is fast, and especially if you have your crew and if you have your resources lined right up. They're generally more energy efficient than stick build. From a cost standpoint, they're right in line with stick build at this moment, but I'm working still on ways to create more of attainability, affordability with them. But their biggest advantage right now is timing and how quickly you can have critical mass, critical impact in a neighborhood um, with the modulars. We just got a little bit of money, and with that, I'm going to be able to like do a block at a time. Traditionally, traditional lenders do not let you have out a whole bunch of money at once. But with this new funding, that is exciting that I can have impact in a neighborhood 5 at a time, 6 at a time, maybe 10 at a time if I can handle that, if I have the broad width for that. But modular housing is something that is a good discussion. Smaller footprint is a good discussion. Working with your local government to change zoning is a great discussion.
I mentioned that driven development was really created to address the supply side of housing, and so we are a nonprofit developer. So you talked about, hey, just because we could doesn't mean we should. In terms of profitability, I think we saw that as a way to drive down the costs, and so we are just removing the profit from the housing market, being a housing nonprofit. So that is one way that I think we are innovating. I know there are a lot of housing nonprofits in Kansas City. A lot of those groups do more of the wrap services, financial education. Teachers Like Me has a whole program wrapped around housing. We really wanted to be intentionally focused on the construction and development side of the issue. So I think that's one way we're being, I guess, unique in our approach. Another way is, LIHTC was mentioned, low income housing tax credits. There are a lot of different funding sources for affordable housing or attainable housing. They can be very competitive. They can be lengthy processes. They're difficult to stack with other funding sources. Something may fund, you may get your award the end of the year, but they're not going to fund it until 3 months into a project. You may get another award, in the middle of the summer, but they only will fund certain aspects of a project. It's very complex to line those funding sources up. So we are trying to simplify that and get philanthropy involved. And philanthropic grants or loans that have a lot of flexibility and that can act quickly and at scale to try and address this issue. So I think that's kind of a unique focus on this. We're certainly partnering with other nonprofits. There are incentives that we are going after that do have to line up, but generally we are trying to avoid some of those kind of longer process to get housing going.
And again, our teachers do pay rent. We just keep it at a low cost for those first 3 years. But I think one of the solutions we had was we were donated 16 lots to build on for Manheim Community Land Trust. So keeping it in a land trust kept it where they didn't have a lot of people outpricing the neighborhood. And so that was one big solution for us. And so we're building our 5th home for teachers, but we're keeping it we call our neighborhood the school zone. And so our teachers there'll be like 27 teachers in one block when we're finished. But part of that solution was because if you look around Kansas City, most of our teachers don't live in Kansas City. And so what we've been able to see more of is our teachers see their kids at the store. There's that neighborhood feel that, our teachers, like someone told me the other day, I went to church and all the welcome people were your teachers. And I'm like, yeah, they're at like 5 churches taking over right now, but they they do a prayer, they do Bible study at the teacher house. I didn't even know that. I just was like, why are their cars all here? And they do Bible study every Thursday. So it's bringing in more of a neighborhood feel. Again, they're not from Kansas City. They've never even heard of Kansas City till we meet them at the university to say, they're like, we'll try it. We'll see what it is. And so people were selling them things like, there's a new airport. And they were like, we don't care. We're 21. But so even the Super Bowl, they didn't care. But I think it's more of they have their community now. And I think that was part of what's missing with our schools is that community feel anymore. And so I think that's been a big major solution. And so for Manheim Park, where they live, they're all in the neighborhood association. We did a block party and the neighbors came out and they were like, we love teachers in our neighborhood. So I think it's really creating what we've been missing in Kansas City.
And I'll say the Regional Housing Partnership exists to sort of aggregate all of the things that these ladies have shared and promote it throughout the region. Where are there best practices that developers, that funders have come across that we can share and amplify so that others can replicate them? Where are there opportunities for us to share education? We have a policy series and a policy innovation series that we're hosting throughout this year. We'll be hosting, shameless plug, a forum on the housing construction workforce on May 1st. So opportunities to have those conversations that can strengthen our housing ecosystem. That is where the Regional Housing Partnership exists.
Great. Well, thank you all. And thank you all for the great work that you're doing across our region. We have just like a couple minutes left. So I think we have some audience questions that we'll try to get through. Right. Okay, this is a good question for Dr. Davis. How do you legally rent to only teachers or any specific group?
Because we're a nonprofit, and I think the other piece is it's not just teachers in there because there may be someone else that needs a place and we fill them in. So that's one thing. The other piece is we're partnered with 10 districts now. And so those 10 districts can send people to us if we need that as well. But we were able to get city funds for it because everyone's been trying to build teacher housing. They're just taking too long for me, so that's I was like, okay, I'll just do it myself. But but I think that's part of the pieces. We're able to put in other people. They have families, they have husbands that are engineers or someone like that or something, but they don't get the affordable price. We just help them find housing. But overall, we have more than just teachers in our housing. We have college students because that's part of our program as well. So they're there in our housing as well. So we can open it up to more people than just the teachers, but we have to get our teachers in there first. That's my biggest thing.
Okay, so a great question here. As a college student interested in civic engagement, what can the up and coming generations do to contribute to a solution? Carlie's got an answer.
So this is and I'm jumping in because Fran and I were literally just having this conversation in the hallway before. And I think that as development happens in any space, it's really important to make sure that the community that is already there is engaged, that the relationships are built with them, because and this is a phrase that I learned in my previous work, but I've carried it with me always to make sure that development is done with them and not to them. And as long as they feel that they have a voice in the process as it's happening, they will not be in opposition to it. Too many we've seen across the Kansas City area, just even in Lenexa just a few weeks ago, that the engagement and the relationship building, that's what creates the space for folks to be open for things to happen around them. Because ultimately, they want to see the improvements. They want to see their neighborhoods grow. And have experienced the consequences of the stagnation and disinvestment, but they want to be empowered in that process. And so there's no other advice that I can give you. It is to learn the power of relationship building that trust, so that you bring those neighborhoods along with you as the process is going.
I just want to add to that I think there is a huge misconception in what affordable housing is. And a lot of folks see it as you're bringing criminals to a neighborhood by providing affordable housing. So as a young person, if you hear about affordable housing being done, I would say speak up about being new to the workforce and not at the height of your salary, and that this is affordable housing for people that are working. I mean, to me, I think everyone deserves housing, but this misconception around affordable housing is bringing in bad news and driving down values in our neighborhoods, and people aren't taking care of things is just wildly out of bounds. I think if young people can say, hey, this housing is for me, this housing is for me as I'm getting my first job, that we can change the narrative around that and change minds. And so if you feel empowered to use your voice to say, hey, this is for me and my peers and the family that I have or that I'm creating and trying to build a life in this community, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I would also say if you're interested, if you're young and interested in this field, come talk to us, or anybody that's doing this leadership that you know of, or if you don't know us, just cold email us, and we would love to talk with you and get you plugged in. Okay, so this one says, love the teacher neighborhood. Is anyone else leaning into building community, not just units? Timely considering today's keynote. Building community, thinking about neighborhood community, not just individual housing units.
I currently have 27 units that are going to be going in at 21st and Quindaro. Our northeast part of KCK has been historically redlined and underserved, disinvested, and given a bad rap, for lack of a better word. But 27 units will dramatically transform the face of that neighborhood. In a 5-block area, there are 31 vacant lots. 4 of them are privately owned. So 27 homes is going to breathe life into a neighborhood. It is going to create community. And I am reaching out to business owners. Can we get a coffee shop? Can we get a juice stop? What can we bring to the neighborhood for these new community members?
I was gonna say, we're just moved over to the Kansas side, so we'll be talking. Yeah. So we just moved over to the Kansas side, and I know that one of the things that I've been meeting with their districts highly involved in this with me, as well as their the government, the city there. And one of the things that we know is the more rooftops they get, the more grocery stores and things that we need to have. So that's something that we want to look at, is how can we bring neighborhoods of teachers there, because they have the same shortage we have over here, and that way they can have those resources that are needed in the community. So
girl, I am so glad to hear that. I was literally going to get on the horn when we left here and be like, hey, I met this lady.
Can I, Hannah, I just want to add on to that too, that I think you can build community without building units, right? So people coming together for a church group or building across an entire couple of blocks and actually creating a neighborhood. But some ways you don't often get that sense of community, I don't think, in a rental product. And one way that we're trying to change that is to be a different kind of landlord. Mm-hmm. So we're hosting financial education series just for the folks that rent in our units, and trying to bring people together and say, hey, if you want to buy a house one day, you can all come to this financial education course and learn how to do that, right? And our residents have reached out about wanting other community type activities together. And so I think you can do that without just building units and building on a block. I think that's a great way to do it, but also just bringing people together that live in the same apartment complex and saying, hey, learn a skill together, or, do something together outside of just passing each other in the hallway.
That's great. Well, we are at time here. I want to give you guys one last chance, 1 or 2 words. If Kansas City wants to see measurable, impactful progress over the next 5 years, what do we need to see happen? What do we need to do right now?
Funding.
It's a good one. Do we all agree with that? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for attending our session today. A big thank you to our panelists. We'll let you all go to lunch. Thanks.